So after watching the first video, my kid said, "Dad, lighten up! Like you didn't tell one joke." So I thought, okay, definitely I'll make it funnier next time around. And then I ended up picking up this book, "The Uninhabitable Earth: Life After Warming" by David Wallace-Wells. It's not funny at all. In fact, I was so concerned about what to write and say about this book that I actually typed up notes, which I didn't do last time. But this was not an easy read at all. Each page is absolutely horrifying, and you always picture climate change and it's something that's going to happen generations from now. And I know that, of course, that we're seeing news about climate change, but we don't know how devastating it really is. Or at least I didn't know how devastating it really is until I started reading this. Each page is just absolutely full of statistics. The couple of numbers that stand out and repeat throughout the book is that by year 2100, if we do everything right, the Earth will warm 2 degrees. And then it lays out some horrifying chapters about what's going to happen in that 2 degrees if we do everything right. Currently, we are not doing everything right. According to the book and the news, we are on track for 3.5 degrees of warming, which is a degree and a half above what this book is written about, which is 2 degrees of warming. Each half a degree, because these numbers seem so small, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the book explains it's hundreds of millions of lives at stake. At 2 degrees of warming, the coastlines here in New Jersey, our new coastline will be I-95, which actually cuts through the middle of the state. So absolutely shocking book. Even while I was reading it, we had the warmest January on record. Antarctic temperatures hit 65 degrees. And I found out through a colleague, and it's this thing about when you find out these bits of information, you start seeing it everywhere. So a colleague of mine this week told me that they're losing a football field an hour in Louisiana, and there was a news article about that this week too. So the shoreline receding back by a football field every hour. We are in some trouble here. So the way the author has attacked this is that he lays out for the most part of the book, very specific chapters of the impacts of global warming. Let me read those chapters, just the titles out to you. This is what's going to happen. Unbearable heat, widespread hunger, drownings of cities, wildfires. In fact, I heard a term this week called fire tsunami. So when a fire comes at you in waves, like a tsunami, it's happening now. Natural disasters that are the norm. So those 500-year storms that we've hit in New Jersey, we got hit by Sandy a few years ago. That's going to become an everyday thing. So those will be just the norm. They'll no longer be a natural disaster. It'll be just the weather, lack of water, dying oceans, unbreathable air. And then once all that's settled, plague and full worldwide economic collapse. 2100, 2 degrees of warming, not far off. So we live near a lake, and spent a lot of summers kayaking on the lake, taking a boat out, enjoying the sunshine and water, or going to a restaurant afterwards. It's a great time, but it's also very important for local businesses who, for those few months over the summer, that's how they make all their money. And last year, our lake got hit with the algae bloom. And of course, New Jersey, typical jokes around the algae bloom. I mean, I grew up watching Toxic Avenger too, so totally get the New Jersey jokes, but then it started happening everywhere. And it was even reported on the news around how this lake was one of the first signals that climate change is here and now in the eastern part of the United States. And what this book talks about is that it's not just some distant future. We are already living in this new climate, one that is potentially uninhabitable for humans in the very near future. There's been several extinctions throughout the history of the Earth, and we could be heading into the next one. And it asks some really, really serious questions, like knowing what you know now. Will you have children and bring them into this planet? I already have kids, so really I got no choice except to fix it. And in the second half of the book, after he describes all the horrors, he does talk about all the challenges of trying to solve this problem. One of the words he uses is that climate change is a hyper object. It is so big, it is so incomprehensible, and there's been no precedent before in history on how to solve it, that we're a little stunned with what to do. And and not everything we're doing is the right thing to do. Going vegetarian at a personal level, for example, some people say that's the right thing to do, but the author here states that you can do that to make yourself feel better, but really we need bigger changes than that. So that was all kind of an awakening for me, and the word he uses and what I have been and describes me to a T is fatally complacent. It's so big, and it's not really going to happen to us in the near future, or our kids. It's down the road. No, it's going to happen. It's going to happen soon, and you don't want to be fatally complacent because it is going to impact our lives. So that's the gist of the book, and a short while afterwards, I can best be described as Mr. Doomsday. Every conversation with my family, it's like, doesn't matter. We're all going to die soon. I was not pleasant. Like, if my social life wasn't bad enough already, this was not helping. Co-workers talking about it, every problem I related to climate change, and with friends as well. It's like, why do I want to do that? Shouldn't we be doing something else more related to climate change? So it is very impactful. I do want everyone to read it. I do think it's the most important book of our lifetime, and still sinking in for me about how this is going to impact me and what I'm going to do. But I did read after I was going through the Doomsday. I'm coming out of the Mr. Doomsday mode right now. I'm trying to get more into action, and I do want to pass along one article that I thought was very helpful. It was from the New York Times, and it was about the title of the article, so you can Google it, is "Stop Freaking Out About Climate Change." And it lists these actions. Ditch the shame. It wasn't anybody's personal fault. It was the systems and the organizations and the governments and our nature that has brought us to this point, not anyone's individual fault. So ditch the shame. Focus on systems and not yourself. So what can you understand about what's working around you, and how can you help in that way? And join in effective groups. There's a number of local organizations that are fighting in your area that you can find out about. Now, for example, there's oil and gas companies that are trying to prevent nuclear energy. And if you do some research on that, you can go out there and vote for ordinances that can prevent further production of greenhouse gases. Probably the most important points: define your role. We each have strengths in us. Don't have to be a climate activist 100% and quit your job and do all that, but there's strengths we can all bring to the table. And then finally, it's know what you're fighting for. And I'm probably going to end this little podcast video vlog thing on this one, which is really, really think about what it means for you for climate change and what can you do about it. And the author of this New York Times article, again, it's Stop Freaking Out About Climate Change, wrote this vision about the why, and it paints this kind of picture of a hopeful future. And let me read it. And again, please read the book. I think it's a very, very tough read. I wrote down how many pages I wanted to read a day because I did not want to actually read it once I got into it. So I just said, you got to read 20 today, you got to read 30 today, you got to read 50 pages today, and that's how I got through it. So you might have to do that. You have to be, even the author writes, you're a brave reader for continuing on. So it's not easy from that perspective with all the information, horrifying information they give you. But anyway, the article, know what you're fighting for, the reason why. Imagine dense but livable cities veined with public transit and leafy parks. Infrastructure humming away to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Fake meat that tastes better than the real thing. Species recovering and rewilding the world. The rivers silver with fish. The skies musical with flocking birds. This is a future where the economic inequality, racism, and colonialism that made decades of inaction on climate change possible has been acknowledged and is being addressed. It is a time of healing. Many ecosystems have changed, but natural resilience and thoughtful human assistance is preventing most species from going extinct. This is a future in which children don't need to take to the streets in protest and alarm because their parents and grandparents took action. Instead, the children are climbing trees. That's a nice image. And I think I'm going to end on that one. Thanks.